keeps allowing people inside the room. So you can spot us pretty much, not all of them, not all of us probably, maybe one or two don't have the background, but you can spot the clan team quite easily because we have this kind of background with our logo. That was a way of making it easier for you to spot us. And also you can see that we are kind of identified in our name. So feel free to send us a message in the chat if you have any queries, any doubts. And well, my name is Veronica. It's in my identifications here on Zoom. And it's up to me today to welcome you all to this event and to present our guest, Paulina. And also it's up to me to say a few initial words about the CLAN project and the reason why we are here today, what the CLAN project is. Yes, I'm sorry, Enrique. Yes, Enrique is recording. Okay. Enrique, can you see this notice that is coming up? This pop-up? Okay. So I was saying that. Yeah, it's up to me to say a few words about the CLAN project and the reason why we are here today. So CLAN stands for Children-Animal Friendships, and it's a project that dates back to 2018. So it has run for 4 years now. It was supposed to last for 3 years only, and then we got an extra year due to the COVID-19 crisis. It got funded by FCT, which is the Portuguese main funding agency and stands for Portuguese Science Foundation. And so here, a formal thank you to this funding agency, to FCT for having funded this project, which was the first of its kind in Portugal, and made possible to put resources into the implementation of the field of human-animal studies in Portugal. So we can say that the CLAN project, it was the main project that was running inside the Human-Animal Studies Hub, which is a wider structure that kind of hosts several different projects and initiatives and training courses. So I think we can say that the CLAN project is a kind of a cornerstone for developing the field of human-animal studies in Portugal, or at least it has been for the last 3 to 4 years. It also, this Human-Animal Studies Hub, this kind of overarching informal structure that hosts the CLAN project as well, won the 2019 Animals and Society Institute International Development Prize for the development of the field in countries where the field is still not developed. And so here, a formal thank you for this institute, whose work has been amazing, as we all in the field know. Thank you for the recognition, the funding, of course, and all the cooperative support that we've had along these years in putting up these initiatives to develop the field. I think I also owe a special word to ICS, the institution where the project is based. It's the host institution, for opening the space for this project and for giving us a green way to make the Human-Animal Studies Hub possible. This includes all the informal support that we've got during the last years from colleagues, from the staff. Impossible to name them all, but all of you know that you are being named here. The CLAN also had the fortune to have as advisors important researchers and practitioners in the field, whose work and advice have been really meaningful for us and has helped us in many ways. Some of them are here in the room. Mara Miele, Jérôme Michalon, Harry Ekman were CLAN's advisors from the beginning. Thank you so much for believing in this project from the beginning. Our first meeting in Lisbon back in 2019 and before a pandemic world were certainly memorable. And Melissa Knowles joined us in the middle of the project and was such an important support to that phase. So thank you all for having shared with us your knowledge, your experience, and teaching us along the way. And most importantly, a few words to thank the CLAN team and acknowledge the incredible amount of work, effort, dedication put in this journey. The project is the result of a collective effort. So thank you for being on board and making all this possible. And for me, I speak, it's been an amazing learning journey for me, and it's been amazing learning this together. So having made these introductory notes, which I thought were important to do, I'd like to introduce you to the most important part of this first slot of time in the conference, to our speaker, Dr. Paulina Rossio, a senior research fellow at University of Oulu. Paulina, thank you so much for joining us. Paulina is an adjunct professor of education at University of Helsinki. She has a very important body of work within the field of multi-species childhoods, has led large-scale projects on animal relations, among them city rats, funded by the Academy of Finland between 2020 and 2024, and animate multi-species childhoods between 2018 and 21. The latter project, Animate, was externally evaluated as one of Oulu's flagship projects in human sciences. Congratulations for that, Paulina. It's very important for the field constitution and development to have a project on human-animal relations gaining this kind of visibility and praise. Paulina is also a senior scholar in the specific area of biodiverse anthropocenes, within which she also leads the Multi-Species Worlds Hub. She leads a transdisciplinary team of researchers, which includes scholars from the fields of education, ecology, biology. She and her team also collaborate with artists working on science fiction literature and biological arts. With this team, Paulina has produced in-depth theoretical empirical studies exploring processes of becoming and being human with other animals. So their approach combines ecological citizen science with education, even animal studies, and the arts. They mostly use post-qualitative and multi-species, non-anthropocentric, of course, methodologies. Since very recently, this very year, Paulina leads the brand new project Fellow Feelings. This is really exciting, which investigates the shared communities of young people and inconvenient or disliked other animals, such as rats, pigeons, slugs, spiders, or wasps. So congratulations and all the best for the 3 years ahead. Paulina, thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing with us your work, your reflections, your experiences about multi-species childhoods. We look forward to hearing you, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Thanks everyone for having me. I will right away share my screen and start the presentation. Oh, sorry, it didn't start from the beginning. Close your eyes. Okay, here we are. So I'm really honored to be invited and to get to share the stories with you that I'm going to tell. I don't think this will be a conventional academic keynote. So there's no citing, no heavy theories, just stories from and sort of like in retrospect from the past projects and ongoing ones that we're engaged in with my group. So this is me speaking, but I always want to emphasize that we have a strong research group in which we work in ways that some ideas and thoughts are generated through shared discussions and working together. So I'm really indebted to everyone in my group and for everything and things that I say and do, like Maria, who's present here, and then Ture Tammi and Riikka Hohti are the people who've been in the group for longest. And then our biologists, Tuomas Aio and Antoni Kervinen, I'm indebted to them for the transdisciplinary reaches in the project. So in my group, we've always foregrounded two things throughout the years. One is the point of view of children in an adult-centered world. and the other is the point of view of other animals in a human-centered world. We've quite recently traced our own thinking in the project retrospectively. It's an article that will hopefully appear sometime next year in the journal called BARN, B-A-R-N. It's a journal of Nordic childhood studies. So in that article, we've identified 3, in a way, phases, even though they're all going on at the same time. But in our thinking about multi-species childhoods, the first phase where we began was focused on children's experiences. And I have to say, because I just noticed that Becky Tipper is in this Zoom, that one of the key moments was when we found Becky's article from 2011 from Children's Geographies. It's called A Dog Who I Know Quite Well. And this was sort of like a turning point and the beginning for us to really start focusing on children's point of view of their significant animal relations. Since then, we've moved on to not only focus on children's experience, but to think about multi-species entanglements. So not just focusing on individuals, but looking at complex entanglements in more situated and particular ways than just children's experiences, and how these sort of encounters and events between children and other animals, how they're shaped by particular cultural and historical, economical, political, and what have you, circumstances and forces. And then maybe the third shift that we're moving towards, and it's not a shift that's going to replace anything that comes earlier, it's just developing of thinking, is to try and start thinking about childhoods of other species as well, or to think about the notion of childhood, whether that could be extended to cover other than just human children, and what will that then begin to do for our research? What kinds of differences or hierarchies or uneven, unjust possibilities between young of different species we can then start talking about. But in this presentation, I'll share 4 stories with you. And each story locates in a past or ongoing project, research collaboration with children and young people, and to an extent also other animals participating in the projects. All of the stories represent significant relations to other animals from the viewpoint of the children involved, but all of them were not conceptualized as friendships by us as researchers or even by the children. Some of them were, but not all. But to reflect the theme of the conference and also to give us an analytical tool, I'm going to frame all these stories as being about friendships for the time being. And to do so, I think also reflects the approach that Elizabeth St. Pierre and Hillevi Lens-Taguchi have introduced, called concept as method. This was a special issue in 2017 in qualitative inquiry. So I will focus on what becomes highlighted when these stories are framed as being about friendships. Or in other words, what does the concept or notion of friendship do to our understanding of these relations in question in the stories? So it's not so much about deciding or defining whether these really are friendships or not, but exploring whether framing them as friendships will give us new and interesting insights about the qualities of these relations. With each of the stories, I will first elaborate a little bit on the wider project that they belong to or came from, and on the research approaches that were used in those. I will then tell the story, and then I will move on to thinking about what begins to stand out when we do consider these stories as accounts of potential friendships. First of all, I would like you to take pen and paper or your laptop notebook file and spend 2 minutes writing down. This is just for you. There's no need to share these later, so no pressure. So write down brief notes about the first things that come to your mind when you think about friendship. And this could be in general, it doesn't have to be between humans and other animals or children and other animals, just generally friendship. What comes to your mind? What is it about? What belongs to it? And I'll time you for 2 minutes. Two minutes is really, really long when you're just looking at the clock and waiting for it to go. It's 1.5 minutes now. You're beginning to be ready, and we can soon move along and begin the stories. What you can do if you want to, you can reflect your notes against the stories or any insights you might get from the stories. And in the discussion, if you want to, we can return to your notes and your initial thoughts and how they worked with the stories. But let's begin. The first story is about earthworms. And it's a story from a research project called Naming the World, which was funded by the Australian Research Council and led by Professor Margaret Somerville as the principal investigator. Most of the study, the empirical field work, took place in Australia, but this story is from the field work that I conducted in Finland during one spring, and I worked in a kindergarten. The idea was of the project, the whole project, Naming the World, was to follow children's responses to the world asking to be named. So Margaret had this wonderful way of looking at the world as if posing questions to us. The world is asking something from us, and she would be interested in particular in children's responses. So in other words, in the project, we wanted to find out how children familiarize themselves with their surroundings, with materials, plants, animals, what have you, and with what surroundings and when. How do children name their surroundings? And this is not just literally about literacies and learning the right names, but more extended idea of what naming, what all kinds of naming can there be. So I visited, for my part of the study, I visited one kindergarten in Finland once a week for the duration of one spring term. I was present always from their midday outdoor time that they spent outdoors. It was every day from 10 a.m. to about noon, so 2 hours-ish every day. And the children in the kindergarten group were from 3 to 5 years old. There was usually 15 to 20 of them present. And I was a participant observer during the outdoor times. I had told the children that I was interested in their everyday doings in the kindergarten yard, and that I wanted to promote with my research the kinds of things that were important to them. I had a GoPro camera with a wearable harness that the children could come and get from me and wear for however long they wanted, and then return for their child to pick up. The camera recorded for the entire outdoor time, traveling with different children to different spaces and places in the yard. And in addition to the video recordings, I also took notes and drawings and photographs. So the story begins. It's Friday in May before noon. The sun is up and it's nice and warm, And it's getting quite hot even for north of Finland. The children run out in the yard, and a few of them take spades and run to the compost at the back of the yard. In the compost and surrounding piles of earth, there are earthworms. The children begin digging the dirt to uncover worms, and as they find them, they pick them up with their spades and run around the yard to show each other and the teacher the worms. They greet the worms enthusiastically. "Hello there, Mr. Worm, nice to see you again. Where are you, my worms? Where did you go?" I keep hearing. The teacher notices this and hurries to bring science equipment to the outside table. Magnifying glasses, tweezers, containers with water in them, and books about worms and insects. In the book, in the picture, you can't see it, but there's the title on the green. It says "Friend or Foe," ystävä vai vihollinen. The children are encouraged to inspect and study the worms. More and more worms are dug up and rushed to the table to be washed clean, inspected, and then placed dripping wet in a clean container, adding up to a pile of squirming wet worms. There's excitement in the air. "Another one coming up. Hello, hello, little worm. Look at you," the children keep shouting. There are children who hold the worms in their hands. Some hold them with tweezers and others take them around in sand spades. The time to go inside is getting closer, and the teacher instructs the children to take everything back to their own place, including the worms. Some worms get placed back in the compost pile. Some are returned to plastic containers next to the compost with only a little mulch in them. The day ends in the afternoon as the children are collected by parents and go home for the weekend. Then on Monday, we all return after an unusually warm end of May weekend. All of the worms in the plastic containers have dried out and died, unable to dig inside the ground to escape the heat and to retain moistness. The teachers go and clean the containers, and the enthusiastic digging begins again. "Hello, Mr. Worm, where did you go this time?" The children in the story are affectionate towards the worms in ways that they know and have learned how to. They hold them, they move them around, they keep them special, they talk to them, they wash them, and they make them be with other worms in tiny cups. All of these things are problematic to worms and cause distress. From the child's point of view, they have lovely, squirmy friends waiting for them at each outing. Someone to play with and to explore the world with and show to each other and to the teachers. And from the teacher's point of view, the worms in the children's interest to them offers many teachable moments. The teachers see this activity as supporting children's interests, introducing scientific tools and methods, teaching about how to capture and identify small animals. All of what is happening seems like a wonderful child-centered activity of outdoor learning. If it's also framed as a friendship between the children and the worms, it's an endearing one from the viewpoint of the children, but a deathly suffocating one from the viewpoint of the worms. But it might still be seen as a friendship, which makes us ask and think about friendships a bit differently. Even beyond this story, are all friendships equally good and happy for everyone involved? And in particular, friendships between humans, especially human children and other animals, can they be always considered equally pleasant and rewarding? Can they ever be considered equally pleasant and rewarding? What might be a way for us to take a step back and to assess the qualities of what we view as friendships, taking account the other animal in the relationship? Does the label friendship mean that it's always inherently good, a good relation to everyone involved? The second story is one about imagined birds. And this story is part of a wider research project called Significant Others, in which we were seeking children's own perspectives and experiences about their relations to important other animals in their lives. We realized at that point, and this is when we read Becky Tipper's article also, that virtually all research that existed about children's relations to other animals at that time was produced from the viewpoint of an onlooking adult, someone else than the children themselves. These relations were assessed through the idea of utility and usefulness of animal contact to children, the benefits to children's socio-emotional development, to their motory skills, or to their immune system and preventing allergies. All of these things were researched. But hardly anyone had paused to ask children themselves what mattered to them in their important animal relationships. And virtually all research had focused on the most usual companion animals, dogs and cats, and disregarding what children themselves consider as animal relations, whether there's something more and beyond the household animals. So we engaged in a year of what we then called multi-species ethnographies. But now I think looking back, I would consider that we just did ethnographies of children and animals' relationships. We've since developed our thinking of what multi-species ethnographies are, and tried to include the viewpoint of the other animals even more than we did at the time of this project. But for this story, for this study, we sought children, we found children to participate who themselves considered that they have important animals in their lives. So we didn't define it for them. We were open to any kinds of animal relations that the children themselves said that they are significant to me. And we proceeded to work with the children, going with them to the places in which they spent time with these other animals. And we engaged in participant observation and quite basically ethnography in those situations. And my focus in this project in specific was to concentrate on those children that had more unconventional relationships with animals. And this story, as well as the next one, the third one, are about those a bit more unconventional friendships or relations. And so the story begins. It's a spring afternoon, and I welcome an 8-year-old child into my home. He comes with his father, who says that his son has been waiting for this meeting eagerly. We've decided to meet at my home because I have lots of birds, and the boy is a self-confessed bird maniac, but doesn't have birds at his house. His father explains that they have no idea where this interest in birds has come. The parents are both not very interested in nature, or they have no nature-related hobbies, so they're a bit puzzled as to why their son all of a sudden is like crazy about birds. His son, he explains to me that his son has for years been really, really into birds. So I guide the father to wait in another room, and then I ask the child if he would like to come with me to greet my birds. As soon as he sees my budgies, 4 of them at the time, flying free inside the house, he begins to talk about his interest in birds. I ask if I could record this talk, and I say that it's because I want to remember all the things that he says and remember them correctly. He proceeds to tell me that he has binoculars and attends a bird club. He watches documentaries about birds and is just really, really, really interested in all kinds of birds. I tell him about the injured wild birds that I take care of and show him pictures from my phone. He can identify all of the species that I show him, even the most difficult ones. And I really praise him for that. And I am truly amazed. And then after a while of talking, he begins to tell me something special. And I know it's special because his eyes light up and he becomes really excited and starts to talk really fast. He tells me that he sometimes invents new bird species, that he might dream about a new bird, and then when he wakes up, he draws it really quickly. or that an idea about a new bird species just comes to him, like just at any point of the day, and he quickly draws it. He then says how he imagines how they look and what they eat, how they behave, and what kinds of sounds they make. He says he pretends to be each of the birds he invents. Explaining this, he asks me if he can climb on my couch, and I say yes, and then he shows me. He jumps off the couch, waving his hands, and says, "This is how I try out, and I imagine what it would be like to be that bird." He sometimes develops hybrid birds, he says, that are half human and half bird. Sometimes they even have machine-like body parts and can, for example, dig underground. He says he has tens of drawings of invented birds. And I asked him if he wants to bring some over the next time we meet, and he says he will. We continued the discuss about birds, but the most spectacular thing I had witnessed did not end up in my recording. The boy jumping off my couch and showing how he explores the newly invented bird species with his own body. So in this story, there's no individual animal that the boy is friends with, but he chooses to spend his time with the diversity that one species offers. He delights at sights of birds with his binoculars on bird trips. He loves spending time learning to identify birds with the help of books. He dreams about birds and invents new bird species. He is friends with not even one particular imaginary bird, but in a way, birdness itself. He's delighted, invested, and caring in his relationships with these birds. But is this a friendship or a hobby or a special interest? What do we call it? For it matters what things are called. Different framings produce different possibilities for different kinds of friendships and relations. If we consider the boy's affections towards birds as a friendship, then we need to expand our thinking of who can be the parties in a friendship. So what if we then need to go beyond thinking about friendship through two individual bodies? What if we de-individualize the notion? If friendship could be a space of potentialities, a space that enables certain kinds of thinkings and doings. And so whoever and whatever share that space or are drawn to that space are in a friendship through being part of the same enabling elements and surroundings. So in this case, in order for us to recognize friendship, we wouldn't look at individuals and the qualities between two individuals and their communications or interactions, but we would look for spaces that seem to invite children and other things and beings and sustain an engaged sharing of that space. The third story comes from the same project than the previous bird story. So significant others, in which we did ethnographies with children to find out why and how significant animal relations matter to them. And as part of this project, as you can recall, my focus was to work with the children who didn't have the most usual animal relations, like pet cats and dogs or hobbies related to animals. So in this next story, the lead child is a 10-year-old child who was a self-confessed horse lover, but had never really spent time with actual horses, nor did she want to. And the story begins. I'm sitting on the floor of Katie's bedroom at her house. It's a sunny afternoon, and Katie's room is warm and filled with bright colors, with ceilings reaching really high. Her mum is in the kitchen, the door is ajar, and we're talking about animals with Katie. I had agreed with Katie and her mom that I would conduct a series of interviews with her at their home. This is because all of Katie's animal relations seem to be located in her room. She had posters, drawings, books, stuffed animals, and other toys, all related to animals, but mostly horses. She told me she belonged to a pony-themed book club and would receive a new pony book each month. She would read it in her bed right away, sometimes too late, and her mom would have to come and ask her to please go to bed already. We laughed at this, and I told Katie that I had been just like her. I was thinking that by meeting up with Katie at her home for over a long period, I would get to know her and understand her love of horses and how she sustained it without never being around actual horses. But then Katie told me about her dilemma. She really, really wanted to get to know an actual horse, but she didn't know anyone who owned horses, and she didn't want to start riding as a hobby because she wasn't interested in learning to ride, but she was interested about building a very special bond with a horse. At the end of that interview, I had let go of my idea to meet Katie at her home and decided to invite her to the stables to meet my horse instead. She was very excited. Her parents agreed that it would be a good idea. So what we did was that we never met at her home anymore, but we kept meeting up at the stables for a period of 6 months, about every other week. I wanted to explore with Katie the kinds of things that she was drawn to with my horse. She began really, really slowly, just being in the presence of the horse, talking to her, listening to me, and taking it all in. She was constantly observing how her own behavior would affect the horse, and she wanted to know what she could do that my horse would like. She kept asking me and asking me for the point of view of the horse. As the weeks and months went by, Katie would keep bringing one question to the stables. She would say, "I wonder what she would choose," referring to the horse. "I wonder what the horse would choose," in almost anything that we did when we were getting the horse from the paddock, brushing her, taking her for a cart ride, when she would ride her. Whatever we did, she would repeat the question, "I wonder if this is what she likes doing. I wonder if she could choose, what would she choose?" In the ending interview or talk with her, I asked Katie if there was one wish that was granted to her, what would it be? What would she wish for? And Katie replied that she would love to be able to understand what other animals think and feel, to know their language. And then when our time came to an end, when my research period came to an end, Katie was really sad. She felt very deeply towards my horse. I asked her whether she wanted to start taking riding lessons or to start going to another stable to greet and to meet other horses. And she replied no, because none of the other horses are Helima, which is the name of my horse. So compared to the first story of the earthworms, where the children cared for the worms in ways that they would care for maybe something inanimate like a rock, in ways that they knew before even meeting the worms, touching, carrying, washing, without thinking of how the worms experienced this caring, or without observing how the worms felt about their caring gestures. Compared to this, Katie in the story is quite the opposite. She's adamant in finding out what the horse thinks, feels, and experiences in her presence, and she wants to know how she can be the kind of person that the horse would want to be friends with. So unlike children who get puppies in their families and instantly go cuddle them, expecting the dogs to like it, Katie is not expecting the horse to like her right away, not before she's learned to be and to behave in a way that the horse genuinely would want to be in her company. And Katie realizes that she doesn't know enough yet in the beginning to be that kind of person. So she keeps on learning, asking, observing, asking more, reading the horse more, and earning the friendship. Katie, throughout the visits to my stables, is patient and gentle, and she accepts fully the possibility that what the horse might actually want is to be left alone. So Katie doesn't hurry to perform the friendship with the horse in any way. She simply is present, waiting for the horse to make her choice. Katie does not want to choose the horse and assume a friendship. She wants the horse to choose her. And then the fourth and final story. This is from an ongoing project called Citizens with Rats. In the project, we work with young people in an upper secondary school, engaging them in a citizen science project where we explore their communities as multi-species. There's 3 stages in the project. All of them have been completed, 3 empirical phases. In the first one, the young people work with biologists and use track plates, special plates that you can, in the image, you can see the children or the young people are placing one of these plates on the ground to count rat prints, to help estimate the size of the rat population in their area. To be able to place these plates in correct places, the students need to learn something about the preferences of rats from their point of view. Where, when, and how do rats move around? What are they drawn to and what do they avoid? Then in the second phase after this first one, the students work with a local anthropologist and engage in walking observations in their neighborhood. They walk around observing the presence and traces of other animals who share their everyday spaces. And then the third and final phase of the study, also completed, the students have worked with a well-known science fiction author in Finland, learning something about expression in that genre, about speculation. And as their final contribution in our research project, they will write, or they have written, speculative stories about future cities where humans are no longer the ruling species. So the story begins. A group of students is walking outside around the school. It's December, there's some snow in the ground, and the temperature is slightly below 0. The students are engaged in the first stage of our study, trying to find where to place the track plates so that rats would walk across them. They record parts of their walks with a phone. Suddenly, as they're walking around a corner of the school, they see a mouse running on the ground. They begin to follow it and film it, wondering where the mouse is going. They follow the mouse for a little while and then continue elsewhere. So this is the video from the story.
Mihin se meni?
Tänne!
Ai tänne? Tossa pomppii. Tää on kuin ihan vauvahiiri.
Tuolla on hiiri. Tuolla on hiiri.
Mihinhän se nyt haluu oikein juosta? Toi on tommonen.
So they send this video to a WhatsApp group that we have in the project that all of us researchers belong to and all of the student participants belong to. And then 2 hours later, a message appears in our research WhatsApp explaining, one student is explaining in the message how she had accidentally stepped on that same mouse later on and killed it. The student was feeling really, really bad, wanting to cry. And one of us tried to console her, analyzing the video, saying that the mouse didn't look very well anyway. I'll give you some time to read the messages. Oh, sorry. So then almost a year goes by from this December and the killing of the mouse. And next year, the following year in the autumn, the same students enter the final stage of the research project, which is led by a famous science fiction author. Their teacher of Finnish language and literature is very excited to have this author in her class. The local press might be interested, we think, and there's an air of excitement and grandeur in like when the author comes and presents and leads the students to the world of science fiction. The task for the students is to craft stories, imagining speculative futures with difficult other animals. One of the groups creates a story called The Mutant Village, in which giant mice keep stomping around the city. It turns out that the student who killed the mouse is in this group. She tells us that she still remembers the mouse from last winter. She says, "I felt really, really bad for a very long time after stepping on that mouse. I remember crying for half an hour straight at school. I don't know why I felt so strong about it, but I did." So when we began to think about the science fiction stories and topics, it was clear to me, our group would write about a world in which humans couldn't step on mice, but mice would be able to step on humans. She continues and says that crafting the story helped her to come to terms with what she had done, to think about it like it just happened, that it was just one thing that happened. The story of the mutant village was dedicated to the mouse who died. At first, it seems that this story has the least elements resembling a friendship. The encounter with the mouse was an accident, and also a very brief one, a brief encounter rather than a long relationship. It lasted less than a minute. The mouse and the girl spent less than a minute in each other's lives physically. The ending was also brutal. One individual not only died, but was killed by the other, even if accidentally. But if we still persist thinking about this as a friendship, we need to then ask, is friendship defined by duration? Or how should we think about duration? Do we consider the time spent together, or the time spent thinking about the other, or the length of memories even when the other one is gone? When did the friendship take place in this story? Could we think about the relationship as taking place only after the mouse's life because of its death? Can you be friends with someone you killed, even if accidentally? Could what happened afterwards be considered as an intense emotional bond, a friendship with performances of respect and honoration, with a final story, a research contribution, and school coursework written in honor and dedication to the mouse? Does the time spent thinking about the mouse count as friendship? The time made for it and not pushed aside? Coming to an end note, like Veronica said, we're currently beginning a new project called Fellow Feelings. And in this project, we work with high school aged young people as citizen scientists to investigate local insect species with methods of DNA barcoding and biological art. The purpose of this is to interrupt a scientific process with artistic means and to complicate our thinking about not only scientific production of knowledge, but also about insects. We used to in the project, we use the term fellow, highlighting other beings who might not necessarily become our friends, but who we could begin to understand as fellows, sharing the same conditions in the same communities, and who we could begin to respect even if we dislike them. Adrian Walsh talks about respectful dissent, which is what I'm currently very interested in. So being able to be respectful and caring towards something or someone that you don't like. So in the project and around it, we're also thinking about things like biodiversity education and about nature conservation, where most of the species in dire need of protection are not cute mammals that we instantly, or even birds that we could just like feel for and become friends with, but they're actually quite they're species that we're not really drawn to, and we might not even. So the question that I'm thinking, at least, is that, is it possible to respect and to care for and to protect another being that, while simultaneously you don't even want to befriend, or you don't like, or you don't even want to like? So what could respectful dissent be? In this project as well, an important way in which we work, and the way in which I think, at least when doing research, is working with words or concepts, like I've done in this talk, exploring how different framings change the situations and interpretations, and looking for concepts that would open up spaces of justice and respect for all fellows involved. Thank you. This was quite a bit shorter than I expected, so more time for discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paulina. Such an inspiring talk, and really addressing the topic of friendship, which is a very much proficuous topic also among humans, and so many interesting questions that you've
so on the 30th of September. Initially, it was a 3-year project, and then we get an extension of an extra year due to the COVID-19 crisis. Our initial and overarching research question was around the ways the relationships between children and animals may contribute to define and redefine the species boundary. We were intrigued by this idea that Paulina mentioned a while ago, that children always question that boundary, that kind of relate more closely with animals, as if they were always closer to animals. And so we decided to start from there by simply asking the question. And so, as I explained before, also there was this interest also on my side in human-animal relations, and on the side of the PI, which is Anna. Anna is the co-principal investigator, comes from childhood studies. So we kind of joined efforts and interests, mainly interests in bringing these two together, children and animals. Moreover, as we are, at least in the beginning, we were all sociologists in the team, we focused on practices, on social practices, and in particular, effective practices, as I was coming from a project in which I explored the literature of affect studies a lot, which was actually a project about friendship and friendship ties. And so we asked about practices between children, between animals, and how they are intertwined with other forms of family practices, because many of us also came from sociology of family and sociology of personal life and intimate lives backgrounds. So, of course, as the project developed, unfolded, many more research questions developed along the way. Within family practices, family dynamics, questions arose, such as how are companion animals contributing to shape childhood itself and family life more broadly? How do families adapt to the presence of a new companion animal? How do they integrate them in their daily life? How do parental educational goals influence the decision of having companion animals? And what are the ways that family relates to them afterwards, among others that you can see here, and that I'm not going through all of them for purposes of timekeeping. Regarding children and animals more specifically, we asked very broadly, actually, what children do in their daily lives with the animals they live with. So more than staying on the side of representations, we really wanted to stay on the side of practices, on what they actually do. And as we move through the visual participatory methods that we used in the project, and that I will explain in a while, we were curious to know if they contributed to reshape those practices. And of course, the questions related to care, taking care of someone, what it means to care for another living being, for children and their parents. So we were mostly bringing together the outlook of the parent and the child, and I'm sure this will come along again in the discussion afterwards. And then we were trying to reconstitute the lives of the animals, the lives of the animals at the crossroads of these discourses, as well as in between the gaps. And we used the visual participatory methods for this as well. So when it comes to the analytical background, very briefly, in terms of the theory we used, as I was saying, the project is at the crossroads of childhood studies on the one hand, family studies, and also human animal studies. And as we did the state of the art, as we all have to do in a project like this, we of course began by acknowledging the contributions from developmental psychology and all its focus on the benefits of animals to child development, even though we critically address these contributions in the project, and we try to problematize them. And of course, we all here know the many questions that these approaches raise. Very inspiring to us were also the genealogical perspectives, all those inspired mostly by the work of Foucault, and mostly their focus on power as a relational construct, stemming from multiple and intersectional discursive apparatuses. Sorry, I was trying to, there's someone that's not unmuted, so maybe some benefit. Yes, thank you. So we took seriously the idea, and we tried to bring this idea to the project, defended by some authors, of the co-construction of the categories of the child and the animal, of childhood and pethood over time, so co-constructed over time. Another important contribution were the critical children-animal studies with its approaches on violence, dominance, and anthroparker socialization. Here we used quite a lot Stewart and Cole's approach. And we also drew a lot on the studies we think share a sociological and a constructive perspective, mostly focusing on family relations and on family dynamics, on children within the family. And here, children-animal relationships are mainly understood within the social and the relational context of family life, so the family dynamic. And finally, the post-humanist turn, the ways in which studies are building the notions of multi-species childhoods, ideas such as the messiness of children-animal entanglements, of notions such as non-innocent relations of care, multisensorial attunement to other species experiences clearly resonated with our findings, even though we didn't start from this perspective. So we started much more from the genealogical and the critical and the sociological / constructivist. And then our findings smoothly led us also to look into this concept. And then we, aha, moment, okay, this approach is very much attuned to some of our findings as well, namely the visual participatory methods and the multisensorial attunement to other species experiences made us reflect on this. So moving on to the method, we used a multi-method approach, but methods mostly designed to research with humans. So direct observation is the main technique of observation that included animals directly, while in-depth interviews at home with humans, with the parents and with the children are of course more human-centered methods, and photo-elicitation interviews and visual methods, visual participatory methods. So we had a sample of 24 families. These families are all Portuguese, living in the urban metropolitan area of Lisbon. They were chosen because they had at least one companion animal. They could have more, but they had to have at least one. And they should have that companion animal at least for 6 months. So they had time to accommodate the needs of living with an animal companion. And then they had to have children, of course, at least one. They could have more, and in between 8 and 14 years of age. We try to diversify the sample in terms of family morphology and also in terms of housing. So there's urban flats, but also houses in the city that have an outer space. They're not that common in Lisbon, at least. And small farms, so houses in the outskirts of the city where there's more space, and so animals have a space outside and children as well to hang around. So what we did was that in step 1 we visited the whole 24 families, and we interviewed both the reference child and the reference adult. So the adult of reference, which was usually the mother, sometimes the father, but usually was the mother. And we did a first observation of the animal in his or her interaction with a child. So this was so we collected 48 interviews in total, and the guidelines were similar, were mirrored. So there's a structure common to children and to their parents, and specific questions that were specific for the children or for the parents. For instance, the guideline of the parents had more questions around memory, biography, past animals, the way past animals frame the current relation with animals, so on. Then in step 2, we revisited the 12 of among these 24 families. So we chose only 12. And we offered the children a photo camera and gave them a task for the next step. And the task was to ask them to photograph their companion animal or animals during 2 weeks, during a fortnight, trying to answer the question, how is it to be an animal here at home? So our aim was to try that the children could put themselves in the paws or in the shoes or in the little legs of their animals and try to tell us the story of how it was like to be an animal at their home. And then in the step 3, we revisited the 12 families, and we did photo elicitation interviews with the children. And also, again, we observed the animals, and we asked children why this photo and not that one. And so there was a whole a different discourse provided. And of course, there were new animals, and some of the animals that were there when we first went, they were not there anymore. They had passed away. There was here a very specific thing that happened to this project and to the whole projects that were running in this step, is that the first step, so the 24 families, they all were all interviewed between October 2019 and January 2020. And then, as we know, in the beginning here in Lisbon, Portugal, was in March 2020, there was the first lockdown and the outbreak of the COVID-19 crisis. And so what happened was that we had the 48 interviews already, but then this outbreak of the COVID-19 happened, and we were supposed to go on field on Easter. We had decided to go in April, so the children would be more with their animals and could so they could photograph them. But then with the lockdown, we had to postpone this. So this phase, this step 2 and step 3, in between, there's COVID-19. And this was really interesting because when we went there again, the families had spent much more time at home with their companion animals, as we know, and the families had had much more time to reflect on the exercise and to really put something in the exercise. So just one last line to show you our sample. This is the distribution in terms of ages, in terms of the structure. So almost half of the sample doesn't have a brother or sister. So lone children are quite common in Portugal, and the distribution are mostly cats and dogs. And I'm not sure I mentioned it before, because cats and dogs are the most prevalent species of companion animals in Portugal. We had decided that at least one of the animals had to be a cat, either a cat or a dog, and then all the other species could, of course, add up, and that's what happened. But mostly cats and dogs, and yes, and this is the kind of like the super brief portrait of the framework and how we began and how we proceeded. And so now I will pass on the words to my colleague Anna, who will talk about childhood and pethood during family, a part of our results. And I will mute.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to present our results. And the first set of conclusions relates to children, animals, and the family. That's it, the way in which both actively contribute to doing family, and in particular animals. The idea that the family wouldn't be the same without animals at home is very salient, more visible in children discourses than in the parents' ones. Animals foster and increase interaction among all family members, and they play an active role in family practices, in doing family. For example, little Carla, who is 13, states, well, life without her would be more like, I wouldn't talk so much with other people, because sometimes we are in the kitchen and she comes with her toy and then we hang around with each other more. And when we are laying down, sometimes we are watching a movie and she goes there and then she begins to touch us, asking to be petted, and we immediately begin to play with her. And in the kitchen, we are all sitting and she comes with her toys. So animals actively contribute to the making of contemporary families in this social milieu, particularly on their relational and affective dimensions. Next, Veronica. Secondly, animals contribute to the making of the contemporary child in the sense that animals encourage the individualization of the child as a singular, as a unique individual within the family. And this impacts power relations between siblings, between the child and his or her parents, and sometimes entails tensions or conflicts. But what is more, and this is very interesting, is that our data show that it's a two-way link. So having an animal of his or her own is important for the identity of the child in the household. But on the other side, very often animals choose a human of their own. They're preferred humans. And this contributes to making them singular individuals within the family. So the choosing a human means that animals' agency was acknowledged in our research at the affective level. Thirdly, the ideal of children responsibility. Responsibility in practice as an educational goal referred to by parents when they decide to have an animal at home is very much at stake. It is certainly a parental ideal, but children participation in practical tasks concerning animals is mostly inexistent. Because perhaps they are very much constrained by an overburdened schedule after school. They have to go to sports, to dance, to music, to English lessons, to internet and so on, and technologies lessons and so on. They have intense and varied extra school activities. Also, perhaps because in Portugal, the education of middle-class parents very much emphasize the idea of spare the work, the hard work at home, domestic chores by to children. No, the norm is that parents should sacrifice themselves for their children at all levels, and this includes the domestic tasks and always tasks with the animals. So we have the prevalence of affective and emotional side of the relation between the child and the animal over the instrumental or the task-oriented one. So being responsible in a certain way is to be able to nurture and provide love and affection. And now, an unexpected finding, and I say unexpected, if we contextualize this in Western middle-class families, is that the word school, schooling, school achievements, school performance is missing in both narratives of children and adults. As if, and now I take a French dichotomy, which was very much popular in the 90s, and which was developed by Pernoud and Régine Serrotin, as if the métier d'enfant overtakes le métier d'élève, which seemed to invade all childhood territories in contemporary societies. This is not the case with animals. Children-animal relationship bring up a universe which seems not to be immediately nor directly linked to school and schooling. Education around having a pet, aims and goals, as well as practices, is played outside of the larger schooling field, being linked to other dimensions, such as bringing up the child as a responsible human by learning how to care for others and how to be responsible for others. That's all. Let's move to another one.
Hello all, I'm going to talk a bit about this section of our results now, entitled The Imaginary and Real Companion Animals. Next slide, please. Okay, so during our study, we started noticing that the children's expectations of what they thought their companion animal would be when first getting them would oftentimes differ from their actual living experiences with said companion animals. And so we asked ourselves a couple of questions, namely, why do they want a companion animal in the first place? Why, what do they value when choosing a companion animal? And what happens when expectations don't match lived experiences? And to address the first question in more generalized terms, most of the children that participated in our study mentioned that the more widespread reason for wanting a companion animal was to have a friend, someone to play with and to keep them company. This was the reason for wanting a companion animal. But then there were other aspects that guiding also the choosing process when it came to a specific companion animal. Next slide, please. And these aspects are the ones that I'm going to talk a bit about now. So we found that there were three main aspects that kept appearing during the interviews, which seemed to guide the choosing process of the children. And these were the aesthetic appearance of the animal, preconceived notions about the species or breed, and ideals based on past experience with prior companion animals. And I'm going to talk a bit about each one of these now. The aesthetic appearance of the animal was an aspect that was prevalent across basically all the types of animals that we found, but was especially more prevalent as the main driving force towards choosing the companion animal when we were talking about animals that were seen as being more low maintenance when or perceived in that way when compared to cats and dogs, and animals that were oftentimes also acquired by an impulse buy at pet shops, animals such as birds, fish, turtles, rabbits. And one such example in our study was a girl who was leaving the supermarket with her family, and they passed through a pet shop and saw in the display window a rabbit, and the girl was struck by the animal's appearance, the cute, cuddly, fluffy appearance of the rabbit, and asked her mother to buy the rabbit. In her mind, she was getting out of this a friend who she would be able to cuddle with, pet, and have a very physical, touchy relationship with. However, what she ended up getting was something different. The animal was not particularly fond of human contact and would sometimes react in a negative way when handled, which made the child a bit more reluctant to interact directly with the rabbit. And in the instances where this occurred, oftentimes when the novelty factor had expired on these other than cats and dogs animals, they would sometimes fade into the background of the house once the child was past the appearance of the animal and faced with the actual needs of that particular animal. And this was a concern for these animals, who are oftentimes limited and constrained by physical boundaries such as cages and aquariums. When it came to the preconceived notions about species and breed, this is a bit more self-explanatory. When this was the case, the main driving force for choosing a companion animal was based on the widespread notion about how a specific species or breed of animal should behave. For example, that Labradors are very good with children. And in our study in particular, we had a boy who did not want under any circumstances to have a cat, because he thought that cats were very mean-spirited animals who would bite and scratch at a moment's notice without any reason whatsoever. And so he, under any circumstances, did not want to have a cat as a companion animal. However, and despite this, his mother ended up getting a cat for them. And after living with the cat and sharing a life with her, he ended up changing completely his opinion about them. This aspect oftentimes allures to the idea that a specific species or breed will always behave in the similar manner, overlooking the individuality of the own animal and generalizing him or her into this wide category of species or breed. When it came to the ideals based on past experiences with other prior companion animals, this happened mainly when the memory of other prior companion animals still lingered in the child's memory, or was very present, or they had a very fond memory of a past animal, and this would sometimes play a very important role in guiding the expectations towards present or future companion animals. And this could possibly impose some problems or tensions, because the child was pre-establishing a relationship with the new companion animal by establishing a role or a frame in which the animal should fit in, and should he not fit in those parameters, some tensions might appear. And so after seeing that oftentimes the imagined animal that the children saw was not the one that they actually lived with, we turned to a concept firstly used by Gillis and then other researchers of families we live with and families we live by, and applied it here to the companion animals as to animals we live with and live by. This meaning the animals we live by are the animals that we idealize, the idea that we have of what the animal should be, and the animals we live with, the actual animals we end up living with and sharing our lives with. And these two types of animals can coexist, and sometimes they do clash, and this is where tensions or conflicts might appear. Next, please. And so to sum up this part of the results, we conclude that to understand children's experiences with companion animals, we need to, it's important to understand that the animals we live with are not necessarily the ones we live by, and this can originate conflicts when both these two imagined and real animal clash, that getting an animal with the purpose of reproducing past experiences or solely based on their aesthetic appearance or widespread notions or preconceived notions about the species or breed might down the line bear some consequences for the child, for the animal's well-being. And that is important to look upon the motives of children when they want a companion animal in order to understand their current relationship with them, as well as to look into family memory and past experiences with other animals. And that's it on my behalf.
Hello, my name is Joana Catella. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Because it says here that my internet connection is unstable. So my name is Joana Catella, as I said, and I work as a postdoc researcher for Project Plan. And this presentation that I'm going to show to you today is based on an article Veronica and I have been working on. So if you don't mind changing the slide, please. And the title of the article is When Dogs Show You Their Belly, It's Because They Feel Protected, Materializing Children's Effective Practices with Pets using Visual Methods. So we asked children from 12, not yet, okay. We asked children from 12 Portuguese families to put themselves in the paws of their pets and to document their daily lives using a photographic camera. We explore children-animal entangled practices to ask how children understand their animal companions' worlds and make them intelligible. In 4 thematic clusters, we show how they represent the preferences of their pets, their likes and dislikes, but also how these preferences take shape and are embedded in family dynamics. Children illustrated the active contribution of their pets not only to their common relationships, but also to the making of the family and to the production of children-pet worldlings, a concept coined by Haraway. In such processes and practices, the human-animal limits are renegotiated and interspecies boundaries are blurred. Next slide, please. Okay, so it is relevant to note the importance of 2 pivotal moments during this research. First, when the child is asked to take a picture according to the given prompt, and second, when the investigator presents him or her with a set of questions, which sets the child to acknowledge and give meaning to the identified moments. These 2 stages are critical both for methodological and epistemological reasons and amount to the contribution of this project to the fields of childhood and animal studies and to the interconnections between both. Children therefore show up both as observers and participants in their pets' lives. They act as witnesses of mundane activities performed by their companion animals, actions which had remained invisible until the moment they were asked to discuss them. This moment of meeting and discussing with the investigator is thus decisive in the research process and to the conclusions in this presentation. Next, please. Okay. So an analysis of the pictures taken by these children and the following interviews was conducted to identify 4 common emerging themes. Inspired by a grounded theory approach, Project Clan singled out 4 explanatory lines where the preferences of these children coincide. Shared spaces, similar behaviors, extended family relationships, and daily routines. For them, it is fundamental to represent house areas where the pet chooses to spend time with them or by itself. Sorry, the plane, which usually corresponds to significant places observed by the animal. They also photographed and highlighted aching habits that mirror the child's self-perception and a network of animals who are not necessarily part of the core family. They point out particular daily routines experienced as family together with their pets, going for a walk, playing in the adult chores, feeding the animal, or giving the animal a bath. Despite being quotidian instances captured by the camera, the photo-eliciting interviews are decisive first and foremost for the children themselves, showing them the exceptional place their animals already occupy in their lives. By being there unnoticed, their presence was taken for granted, then acknowledgement of its importance in their daily lives arrived later. Next. So the first set of pictures was organized according to a common thread, place shared between children and their pets. The importance of sharing space, time, and being present in each other's lives as family members is expressed in several pictures and explained by the child. Family dynamics are marked by common spaces, which produce shared worlds where each one accommodates each other's preferences, and are also mediated by ideals and principles valued by these children, such as companionship, care, and safeness, believed to be experienced on both sides. Similar behaviors are key to understanding the animal's perspective and to acknowledge its preferences, which surprisingly or not, are identified by these children as quite identical to theirs. One of the pictures responsible for causing the strongest feelings features a shovel filled with dog excrements, and it was taken by one of the children, as you can see on the slide. When asked why he took it, the child immediately replied that retrospectively, he thought it had not been a good idea to photograph it and that he wanted to delete the image, but he didn't know how. However, he picked his picture both as his favorite and his least favorite, but also as one of the most representative photos for both the animal and the child. When asked why this image caused so many interpretations, the boy replied that in fact it says a lot, and that in the end we are just like dogs because we also poop, even though it's not a pretty image to look at. The interview was a defining moment for the child to reflect upon the meaning of such a paradoxical image. Next slide, please. So the following set of pictures is important because it points to an enlarged idea of family relationships. For most of these children, a pet is more than the dog or the cat living in his or her house. It's also the neighbor's already deceased dog who was important during a phase of the child's life. It's the small dog who acts like the sibling the child wanted to spend time with. It's the pet she plays with because it reminds her of an animal she used to have. The importance of relationality is here again voiced through the inclusive and linked worlds between children and their animals, even the ones who are no longer alive or the ones who do not belong to the nuclear family. And last but not least, daily routines are important to establish a sense of belonging to a family. Like pictures, they are responsible for producing relationships imbued with meaning and in the long run to produce family. These daily routines are composed of repetitive actions and practices that are performed either by children or adults, such as feeding or playing with the animal. Our data also shows that other activities like walking the dogs or giving them a bath are shared with other family members. Dog walking is an activity where several members of the family are present at the same time, both human and non-human. It is considered to be a unique moment where fun times are shared among all. For some, however, it can be too much fun to handle, such is the case of Lucky, one of the dogs, who in the words of the child, gets too excited when they take her for walks, and starts jumping and pulling despite being the smallest. The last picture was taken by the child, but it features the boy's father, who's probably stronger and more able to hold the dog when it's time to give him a bath. It was chosen because it shows how different tasks are distributed among family members and how in these apparently mundane activities, multi-species families are created. Thank you.
Thank you. So we come to the final part, so the wrapping up. Trying to summarize, I'll try to close just by summarizing some of what we've just said. and what we think could be some of the contributes from the CLAN project to researching children and animal relationships. So first and foremost, I think the project clearly showed this, that animals actively contribute to the making of what families mean today, how families are done and undone as well. Mostly in the relational and affective dimensions, but also there's a lot about instrumental dimensions around the chores, taking care of the chores needed that have to be taken care of in order to have an animal. Also this idea that the animal is contributing to the making of that child, that particular child, as a singular individual within the family, someone with a singular identity, and in this process the animal becomes someone also with a singular identity. So there's this reciprocity, this ontological becoming together as singular, which is very much, as we know, a structural characteristic of our modernity or late modernity. And of course this also applies to other family members. There's this strong emphasis on responsibility as an educational goal, but also this contradiction in relation to how it is played in practice. So there is reduced to non-existent participation of children in tasks related to animals, and participation is very much constrained by an overburdened schedule, as we saw. And the idea that animals indirectly bring up children as responsible adults in the making, but not necessarily as students. So children out of these relationships are played outside of the schooling strict environment. There's this strong idea of the role that the imaginary around companion animals may play. Around species, around breeds, but also around specific individuals when it comes to past animals that passed away. And this is very strong in some of the narratives of the parents in particular. So this idea that we are bringing from the sociology of personal life and family, that the families we live with are different from those we live by, just as the same the animals we live with are different from those we live by. And so this tension must be addressed by us scholars and by all those working with animals and children, practitioners, in order to really understand what's happening in their effective practices because of conflicts, because of challenges in general that may arise. The role of family memory and past family experiences was also shapes this imaginary and these choices. And then this strong impression that the project brought us about the way that photographing the animal, the role it played in bringing up, helping to develop new ways of paying attention to companion animals and reflect upon their relationships with them. And some parents even declare this quite clearly, like, oh, my daughter didn't pay a lot of attention to the cat, but since you went there and gave him a photo camera and she photographed the animal for 2 weeks, now she paid a lot more attention and she can describe in much more detail how the cat is. This extends also to the family's relations with the animals. And this is also a result. For instance, Becky Tipo is here in the room, clearly showed us in her inspiring article from a few years ago that children's accounts are inclusive, so they tend not to make a distinction between their own animals and other people's animals, and this is very much present in our own work. So our results also resonate a lot with what colleagues have been doing across the world, and that is also very interesting for us. And also this idea that the visual accounts of the lives of animals shows that sharing space is crucial, and this brings us back to Paulina's talk early today, and how space also became relevant, at least in one of the stories, and how we can imagine new ways of bringing this space, make this space help us to better understand these relationships. And in this case, in the case of our families, it's the family dynamics are very much marked by common spaces, common activities, and there is very often a reshaping of the way these spaces are used by the humans through the way they become used by the animals and through by the interaction itself. Yes, I think this would be our main take-home messages, even though not as short probably as, but at least the ones we wanted to highlight. So thank you for listening. And if I'm allowed, I might interrupt the sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Now I think we can pass to the commentators. May we start with Professor Mara, maybe? You know, so is it okay for you? So thank you again, Professor Mara, for being here with us today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you to the whole team. It's been a pleasure to see the development of this project from, you know, a long time ago when the project started, and then how it has developed. I know you had went through a difficult period, like all of us through COVID. You had many challenges, and it's really great to see, you know, the wealth of data that you collected, and how everything now is coming to an end, is coming to fruition. So first of all, congratulations for all this work you've done and all the interesting data that you presented. I really love the mixed methods that you adopted, and the different sources of input that you use to look at the experience of children living with non-human animals as pets in different kind of families. I really like, and I would like to see more. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow when, you know, you present more of the visual data, which is really, you know, interesting. And so I'm curious to see a bit more. And looking at your presentations, I think that there are some very interesting points for discussion that they might lead in, to further, conversations, how the companion animals that live in these families, how they contribute to make the families, and how they contribute to the individualization of the child. I think that would be, they were very, very interesting concept. I really would like to hear a little bit more what is the actual doing of the pet, and how is this contribution of doing of the family. There was a little precious, citation or sketch of an episode. Then we're all watching TV, and then the dog comes and brings a toy, and he's interrupting, what they're doing because she wants to play, and then, and then the family or the child or the family, they start to play with the dog, and he's changing a bit the dynamics. I really would have loved to hear a bit more about these kind of interventions that are, the points, the moments in which you see the activity of the non-human animals, the companion animals, that is actually intervening in the family dynamics and is affecting the way in which practices, everyday practices, the intimacy of the family life are actually affected by the presence of the dog, interrupting certain activity, proposing others, changing the way in which the conversation of interaction are actually going. I was also very interested in this concept that the pet or the animals, whatever, is helping the individualization of the child. Again, that leads to major curiosities in, well, I really would like to know a bit more. How is this happening? What are the steps? What are the practical instances in which you see that the pet is actually leading to the individualization of the child? And then, the fact also that you mentioned that every companion animal is also choosing a member of the family, is not, it doesn't necessarily agree with allocation of the pet, you know, as dedicated to the child, but is actually choosing. I mean, this is obviously, you know, again, something that it would be really worth exploring in terms of the pet's activities, the pet agency in, you know, choosing the people that they want to interact with, choosing the people that they trust the most or they rely the most, you know, for feeding, for caring, for, you know, all sorts of activities. Also, the things you said about, you know, the lack of involvement of children in the actual practical task. This is nothing new. We know very well that lots of families, lots of parents, they think it's a very good idea to get a dog, a cat, or, you know, a turtle, a guinea pigs, whatever, as a companion for children, but very hardly that translating to responsibility, you know, making the child responsible for the task is more considered like an activity that is part, the very same way in which parents take responsibility for taking the children to sport activities or, you know, language lessons. They also take responsibility for the interaction with the child. This is also probably linked to the age of the children that you've been looking at, which is quite earlier on. But also for, you know, these ideas, what is the role of the dog or the cat, so the guinea pigs, is it's part of a much longer series of practices, or, I mean, using a term that is, it comes from, you know, animals, is more enrichment of children's life with the pet as part of the experience. And then there is something, yeah, very interesting, you know, as Anna was saying, you know, the school is completely absent in this. And this is, yeah, this is really interesting. You know, there are 9 million dogs and something like 20 million cats, for example, here in the UK. And there is no education, no, you know, it's all left to either the families or the private sector or the NGOs to provide education and regarding how to live with non-human animals. And we see that, and this is a responsibility that is very much left with the families and is not part of, you know, considered part of a proper topic for education. Very interesting, it's everywhere, more or less the same, definitely something that should be explored more and pointed out. So all this is something that, you know, I learned a lot and I really enjoyed your presentations, and I think is all very, very interesting. If I can come with some suggestion or, you know, point for further discussion, I mean, going back to Chris Philo and Wilbert, you know, 22 years ago in year 2000, they wrote, you know, I'm a geographer, so I refer to some of my colleagues' work. Animal geography is what we do. They wrote this famous book, Animal Spaces, Beastly Places, and they proposed this distinction between, you know, the places that, the spaces that humans identified for non-human animals, and the beastly places, which are, you know, the places that non-human animals build by themselves, or they would rather live themselves. And I mean, using that kind of distinction, I think you've done a great job at describing the animal spaces, how these families are, for example, proposing, arranging spaces for non-human animals or companion animals, how they rearrange, you know, the family practices. But there is very little in your stories, in your narratives, about the actual pets. What do they do? who are they? You know, you don't even mention the names, the age. You know, how did they end up in living in these families? What do they do? I mean, probably, you know, your visual materials, the photos that you ask the children to take about their experience might provide some insights in this. But I would say that, you know, in looking at the construction of this relationship with children and animals, you know, the voice, let's to say, or the animals that you look at is kind of, you know, missing. It doesn't really come through. And the spaces that they, you know, how they inhabit these spaces, yeah, it's a bit missing. We demand also the image of the relationship, so the practices that you describe, they seems to be very much focused on positive aspect. The positive contribution, definitely the positive contribution to the emotional and psychological development of children is a great motivation for parents to get a pet. The short or small stories that you say, you know, you narrate about the joy of playing, the fun that you can have, you know, the shared positive experience. Is there anything negative? There is, you know, that if you look at the statistics of companion animals, the number of animals that get actually abandoned every year is really high. Constructing a relationship with an animal is really difficult. They, you know, is not something that comes, you know, easy or free. What we ask animals to do to live in a human-centered world, it's really hard for animals. It's really hard to ask animals to adapt and live. And many of these animals, they live in a condition of stress. Some of them, they may adapt, other they may not adapt. You know, it seems that the experience of the non-human animals in this construction of the family or contribution, you know, or construction of friendship with children is a bit missing, you know, it's or left a bit unexplored, you know, not necessarily explored. Probably there is much more in your, you know, visual materials, and it might come, you know, at the, you know, later stage. So, I mean, I just stop here. I could go on forever, but just start rambling. You know, this is just my first impression. So thank you also for involving me, and it's been really a great pleasure to listen to all your research and everything that you discovered so far.
Thank you, Professor Mara. I don't know, Veronica, would you like to say something before? Maybe we can pass to Professor Daphne. Okay, so now we pass to the second commentator, Professor Daphne. Thank you very much again for being with us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Leticia, and thank you very much, Veronica, and the entire CLAN team for inviting me to take part in this fantastic event, and especially for presenting their fascinating research today. This is a very important project that offers insights into an especially prevalent practice or way of living, interacting, and connecting, but one that has not been sufficiently studied. Following Paulina's keynote, I would like to pick up on the notion of friendship and explore various aspects that arise when we look into multi-species friendships between children and their companion animals. Dogs, and also cats or turtles or rabbits, are often called our best friends. The core words employed with respect to pets are often love, friendship, and loyalty. In fact, we may sometimes receive more friendship and companionship from our animals than from our human friends and neighbors. Animals are perceived as filling the house with a benign presence and with the safety of their faithfulness and devotion. Children, as well as adults, can acknowledge the animal as their confidant and source of emotional support. Companion animals can supply children with a source of continuity and stability throughout their lives, and also provide company by becoming a playmate. Children can talk to their animals and confide in them when feeling sad, angry, or upset. These conversations can give them a sense of support and improve their mood, It is therefore not surprising that many children regard their pet as their special friend. The animal can be an accepting, non-critical friend, and according to Davis, also a non-authoritative friend. Two quite opposing claims have been made as to why children and animals often seem to have a close relationship, and the CLAN team have touched on this in one of their articles. On the one hand, it has been claimed that there is an innate human interest in all forms of life, which leads to a fascination with animals at a very young age. This fascination is intensified through children's empathy for the animal's feelings and the intuitive sense of status similarity with them. For example, anthropologist Cherry Ortner's classic analysis from 1974 examines the ways that infants and children are categorized with nature and animality. The younger children are, the easier it is to find their animal-like qualities. They crawl, lack language, and are unruly, unsocialized, not toilet trained, and governed mainly by reflexes and instincts. On the other hand, it has been claimed that through animals, children learn to distinguish themselves as humans. This formation of cultural categories takes place not only through direct contact, but also through media and books to which children are exposed from a very young age. This brings us to the question of whether children are innately connected to animals as similar beings, or whether animals are perceived by children and their parents to be tools for their utilization. But as the study presented here today illustrates, we do not have to choose. It is the combination between the two that makes these interactions so important, at least to the human counterparts in these relations. Let us begin, for example, with the choice of animals in this research. The families all have a cat or dog or both, sometimes other animals as well. This is because these are the most prevalent companion animals, not only in Portugal, but worldwide, which raises the questions, why do we choose cats and dogs as our main companion animals? We can discuss many historical and prehistorical reasons, as well as zoological and psychological ones. For now, let us consider the perfectly liminal aspects these species offer. These animals are similar enough to humans. They display emotions, thoughts, care for others, etc., yet are not too similar for us to confuse them with humans. They can adapt and be trained, they show affection, are usually willing to be cuddled, and have neotenic characteristics. In short, they enable us to view them as almost, but not quite human, childlike, affectionate creatures. This almost but not quite, I argue, is the most important aspect in our relations with companion animals. What is more, the very perception of companion animals as friends and family members is based on two closely related themes: anthropomorphism and unconditional love. The anthropomorphizing of pets seems to indicate that the love for the animal is viewed as similar to that directed at humans. It can strengthen the perception that human-animal friendship transgresses boundaries, for it may indicate that the animal is considered to be a minded, feeling, and self-aware human or quasi-human. At the same time, it can also denote a rather different assertion, namely that the animal cannot be loved in and of itself, and that the creation of a loving relationship with an animal is based on imposing human-like qualities on it. Anthropomorphism can be seen as merely a metaphorical projection, one that is often conceived of as cute and funny, since it does not, in effect, turn the animal into a human. One of anthropomorphism's main derivatives, the desire for unconditional love and companionship, is something that cannot easily or necessarily be satisfied with humans, yet it is believed that such love can be attained from animals. In fact, it is this perceived constancy of the pet's love and presence that is valued. A frequent premise that arose from my fieldwork as well as others' research is that pets give us love and acceptance independent of looks or achievements. The relationships with them are not as complex or potentially hurtful as with humans. People may love pets for their unconditional love, but they do not necessarily provide their pets with such love, and all too often betray the animal's love and trust. The animal is expected to be a loyal friend, yet the human is not always obligated to respond in kind and may unfriend the pet. Combined, anthropomorphism and unconditional love transform companion animals into not quite human, but perhaps better than human friends. As was shown in the clan team's research, they are more faithful, offer unwavering companionship, give us joy, provide us with health benefits and loyalty. They are tools for our advantage. But what makes them such successful tools is the fact that they are living beings with whom we can have somewhat mutual relations. We may need to learn to respect their boundaries and care for them, but through this, we also learn to respect and care for humans. It is their liminal or flexible status that makes them especially suitable for this role, to prepare children to be empathetic, caring, and hopefully responsible. This is not to say that the children, as well as the parents, do not love their animals and are not devoted to them. Some of these animals are rescues, and most, if not all, are considered important members of the household and the home. But at the same time, the levels of commitment, responsibility, and obligation are often less than those towards humans. Animals can be brought into our families for the sheer purpose of fulfilling dreams, through the way they look in their aesthetics, their cuteness, their symbolic status, etc. This might not be starkly different than what we do with our fellow humans, but we tend to be less devoted and obligated when it comes to multi-species relations. While we often hear of the benefits that human-animal relations have to offer, the research project presented today, but I think especially more through the articles that you sent to me and I read, really does effectively demonstrate the discontinuities and complications that can arise when cultural scripts and narratives, as well as memories, do not coincide with the actual animals and relations formed with them. Children may fear animals or be disappointed in their traits and behaviors. In fact, pets' behaviors are monitored and supervised in the home and the communities, not only as physical processes of cleanliness or physical safety, but also semiotic processes of meaning making, of what it means to be an animal, a companion animal, and a human. Animals in the home are considered part of their family, and their animalness is supposed to be physically and symbolically contained. If it is not, their animality becomes clearer. They bark, growl, tear open garbage bags, leave their defecations lying around. The more these behaviors occur, it becomes harder to hide the fact that these are in fact non-persons, and they may come to be perceived as menaces and threats, often given away or relinquished. These multi-species relations bear significance for the very lives and well-being of both the children and the animals in these families. For this reason, it is very important to explore not only human conceptualizations of these relations, and here I completely agree with Mara, but also the actual roles and experiences of the animals themselves as actual subjects that take place in everyday routines and practices in the home. This has been taken into account in this research, but perhaps this might be something to contemplate and develop even further. Multi-species relations between children and companion animals are fascinating and important because they're messy, complicated, and intricate. Children exemplify how boundaries may start off as fluid between humans and animals, living and dead beings, real and imagined. And it may often seem that human-animal relations, especially among children, transcend the species divide. But the incorporation of animals into human homes can also serve as an important tool of demarcation and separation. Interactions with companion animals in the home can in fact teach children about boundaries, dominance, and the very notion of what it means to be human. These are power relations that reinforce boundaries as they blur them, that subjugate animals as they are lavished with affection, that offer possibilities of abandonment and neglect alongside responsibility and care. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I think we have plenty of time for discussion. Now we open to the audience. I don't know until there if there's something that Veronica or maybe people on the team want to say.